Close your eyes and relax your mind. Let me take you back in time, drifting to a very distant past, tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of years away from us. It was the era of prehistoric humans, where the wild world reigned, where humans were but a tiny part of vast nature, relying on old-growth forests, stone caves, and immense savannas. When thinking about the survival threats to our ancestors, what do you usually picture? A saber-toothed tiger growling in the dark night? A fierce wolf pack on the prowl? Or the piercing, bone-chilling winters of the Ice Age? Those things were indeed terrifying. But there was another enemy, more silent, invisible to the naked eye, yet it sowed death at a staggering rate, no less than any wild beast. That was intestinal diseases, and specifically, the most devastating in the wild, diarrhea. In our modern world, diarrhea is usually just an inconvenience. You eat some spoiled food, your stomach grumbles. You go to the bathroom, take a few pills, rehydrate, and a few days later, everything is back to normal. But put yourself in the shoes of a prehistoric Homo sapiens or Neanderthal. Diarrhea wasn't just a stomachache, it was a death sentence hanging over their heads. In an environment where you had to constantly move to forage for food, being drained of energy, severely dehydrated, and unable to stand meant you would become prey for wild beasts, or be left behind when the tribe had to migrate. Life and death were separated by a remarkably thin line, and that line was sometimes decided by a mouthful of unclean stream water or a piece of rotting meat. So, what caused this nightmare for our ancestors? Their living environment was a biological minefield. Prehistoric humans were hunter-gatherers. The water they drank came from streams, stagnant puddles, or open lakes, where wild animals also came to drink and excrete. A heavy downpour could wash countless pathogens, bacteria, and parasites into the tribe's water source. Furthermore, food preservation was a luxury concept. Before mastering fire and techniques like sun-drying or smoking, humans had to eat the fresh meat they hunted, and sometimes, during days of famine, they were forced to scavenge the rotting carcasses left by other predators. Salmonella, E. coli, or cholera bacteria were always lying in wait. In addition, foraging for unfamiliar fruits and roots containing mild toxins was also a common cause of their digestive systems reacting violently. When someone in the tribe started writhing holding their stomach, spasms hitting, and their body starting to flush out precious water, how did they cope when there was absolutely no concept of medicine, bacteria, or antibiotics? The survival instinct guided them to the most miraculous remedies of Mother Nature. And one of the earliest, most common methods sounds absurd to us today: eating dirt. The scientific term for this behavior is geophagy, the practice of eating earth. How did prehistoric people know eating dirt could cure a stomachache? They didn't have laboratories, but they had a great teacher: nature. Our ancestors were master observers. They lived in groups, harmonizing with all species, and they saw monkeys, elephant herds, or migrating birds sometimes gathering at a specific dirt cliff to chew and swallow clumps of clay. They realized that animals that ate poisonous leaves or were sickly often sought out this type of soil. And so, through the instinct of imitation and experimentation, humans also took a taste. They discovered that not just any dirt was edible. They looked for cliffs of white, yellow, or red clay, usually located deep under layers of humus, near riverbanks or inside caves. Modern science has proven the greatness of this unconscious choice. Clay contains high levels of minerals like kaolin and smectite. Did you know that the active ingredient kaolin in white clay is the main component of geopectate, an incredibly popular anti-diarrhea medication in the 20th century? When swallowed into the stomach, these fine clay particles act like a giant sponge. They have a molecular structure that helps attract and retain toxins, bacteria, and viruses in the intestinal tract, preventing them from entering the bloodstream, while simultaneously thickening the waste, miraculously halting the diarrhea. Prehistoric humans didn't know about molecular structures. They only knew that after chewing a handful of mashed clay, the severe cramps subsided and they were saved. But nature didn't only bestow clay. When humans began to master fire, a monumental milestone that completely changed the course of human evolution, They didn't just use it for warmth, to ward off wild animals, or to cook food. They also found an incredibly effective antidote and diarrhea treatment right in the ashes of the previous night: charcoal. Imagine a hunter who accidentally ate a poisonous fruit, suffering severe stomach pains. In his writhing, perhaps out of instinct or a serendipitous coincidence passed down through generations, he grabs a handful of black charcoal from the dying embers, chews it up, and swallows it down. The gritty, intensely bitter and dry sensation fills his mouth, but just a few hours later, a miracle happens. Charcoal, when burned in anaerobic conditions or burned incompletely, creates a network of microscopic pores. Today we call its refined version activated charcoal, a standard antidote in emergency rooms worldwide. As it passes through the intestinal tract, charcoal binds to pathogens, absorbs toxins and gases produced by bacteria, and then safely expels them from the body. And so, alongside the clay cliffs, the blackened chunks of charcoal from the hearth became an invaluable, life-saving pill for the tribe. The battle for survival didn't stop there. The old-growth forest was a massive treasure trove of medicinal herbs. But to decode that treasure, prehistoric humans had to pay with many lives through a brutal process of trial and error. Thousands of years of tasting every type of leaf, every layer of tree bark, every grass root formed an invisible, orally transmitted medical dictionary within each tribe. For diarrhea, they discovered the power of astringents. Have you ever bitten into an unripe persimmon by mistake, or chewed a bitter raw green tea leaf, feeling your entire mouth pucker up and go dry? That is the effect of tannin, a plant compound found abundantly in nature, especially in oak bark, willow, blackberry roots, or the leaves of certain wild guavas. When prehistoric humans had diarrhea, their intestinal tract was in a state of inflammation, swelling, and continuous fluid leakage. Chewing and swallowing the extract of these tannin-rich barks and leaves would create a protective membrane, firming up the intestinal mucosa, reducing inflammation, and inhibiting the secretion of fluids into the intestinal lumen, thereby directly halting the diarrhea. Imagine the image of a prehistoric mother feeding her child who is fading from dehydration, bitter, astringent drops of juice squeezed from crushed oak bark. The child grimaces at the bitter taste, but that very bitterness is the life sap holding on to the fragile life of the child against the scythe of death. However, even with clay, charcoal, and astringent leaves, the greatest threat of diarrhea remained dehydration. Without ORS, oral rehydration salts, without IV fluids, how did prehistoric humans cope with the depletion of fluids in their bodies? Their survival instinct told them to drink continuously. But what if the stream water source was the very cause of the disease? Throughout evolution, humans gradually realized that fast-flowing water from high elevations or water trapped in leaf axils, tree trunks, and wild coconuts was much safer than water in mud puddles. One of the greatest evolutionary advantages of the human species is sociality and compassion. Unlike many solitary animal species that would abandon a sick companion to fend for themselves, early humans knew how to care for one another. When a member collapsed from diarrhea, unable to search for water themselves, others in the family or tribe would bring water to them, using gourds, shells, or large leaves to feed them sip by sip. This pack-minded care, combined with rest in a safe cave, played a decisive role in giving the patient's immune system enough time to fight and destroy the pathogen on its own. The human body is inherently an incredibly marvelous biological machine. Diarrhea, after all, is the digestive system's most powerful defense mechanism to expel anything toxic as quickly as possible. If the patient is provided with enough water to replace what was lost, their body will clear the pathogen itself and recover. Accompanying these physical and herbal methods, we cannot fail to mention an extremely important aspect of prehistoric life: the spiritual world and the role of shamans, or faith healers. In the worldview of our ancestors, illnesses were not caused by bacteria or viruses because they couldn't see them. To them, the agonizing cramps, the exhaustion, and death were caused by evil spirits, the wrath of the forest god, the river god, or dark curses. When a diarrhea outbreak spread through the tribe, perhaps because everyone shared a rotting animal carcass, panic ensued. At this time, the tribe's shaman would step forward. With fierce dances, pounding drums, whispering chants, and smoke from blazing herbs, the shaman performed exorcism rituals. They might rub ashes on the patient's aching stomach, blow smoke in their face, or make the patient wear amulets made of animal teeth and small bones to ward off evil spirits. Don't rush to laugh and assume these rituals were useless. In a harsh environment, fear and stress severely compromised the immune system. The shaman's ritual brought an invaluable power, psychological comfort, hope, and the placebo effect. When patients believed the evil spirits had been driven away, their spirits lifted. They became less stressed, thereby creating more favorable conditions for the physical body to focus its energy on healing. The combination of rudimentary herbal remedies and psychological therapy from spiritual rituals was humanity's first healthcare system. As time flowed on, when humans entered the agricultural revolution about 10,000 years ago, abandoning the nomadic lifestyle to settle down, farm, and raise livestock, the war against diarrhea turned a new page full of blood and tears. Living densely concentrated in cramped villages, cohabitating with livestock and poultry, along with improper waste and fecal disposal, created a perfect landing pad for gastrointestinal pandemics. Cholera, typhoid, and amoebic dysentery began to slaughter human populations on a scale larger than ever before. But it was also during this period that the accumulation of knowledge gradually became systematic. People started to know how to boil water, how to ferment foods to create beneficial bacteria, and how to use garlic, ginger, and countless herbs with strong antibacterial properties to add to their food. Not just for flavor, but also for disease prevention. The human gut also silently evolved. Individuals with strong digestive immune systems who were more tolerant survived and passed on that resilient genome to us today. The story of how prehistoric humans dealt with diarrhea is not just a historical page about primitive medicine, but it is also an epic about the resilience of our species. From the hastily swallowed handfuls of clay by the riverbank, the bitter chunks of charcoal in the dark cave, the astringent drops of bark extract, to the humane care and prayers echoing in the night, our ancestors snatched life from the hands of death in the most miserable conditions. Every time you accidentally get a stomachache and take a pill, remember that to have the convenience and safety of today, millions of people who came before us had to use their own bodies to experiment, to survive, and to lay the very first bricks for humanity's medical foundation. The past is always alive, right within our DNA. And the resilience of those dirt-eating, charcoal-chewing humans back then is still flowing in your veins right at this moment. Our time-traveling journey will close here. Hopefully, this harshly brutal yet incredibly miraculous story of survival has brought you truly fresh perspectives on the history of our very own species.